Welcome to the CX Sessions from the Customer Experience Innovation Institute. Every episode, we provide an innovative perspective on customer experience from the people who are changing your world, one experience at a time.
Welcome back to CX Sessions from Melbourne, Australia. I'm your host, Simon Chris, and joining me today, I'm really excited about this, from Copenhagen in Denmark, is Stine. Stine, welcome to the CX Sessions.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you here. I know that you are the founder of the experience management community in Denmark and have a consultancy by a similar name. Would you like to just give a few minutes about who you are and your background?
Sure. So I'm an airport and customer experience inclusion and diversity enthusiast. That is the short version. The longer version is that I've worked within customer experience and also sales for the past 15 plus years, ranging from organizations like, Copenhagen Zoo, Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, and my latest employment was Copenhagen Airport. And as you said, now I'm independently working as a consultant specialized in amusement parks and airports.
Yeah, and I want to get to airports. I think we're going to have a great chat because I travel a lot too, so I have opinions about airports. But Tivoli, I've been to Copenhagen. I've been to Tivoli. It's an icon in Denmark. Talk to me a little bit about what customer experience means when the audience that's coming to Tivoli, and for those that are listening to this podcast that don't know about Tivoli, there are shows and restaurants and gardens and rides. Basically, you name it, you can do it in Tivoli Gardens. What does customer experience mean there?
Yeah, so Tivoli is, like you said, it's an amusement park / I would say cultural nest of a lot of different art forms. So it's not your traditional only for kids amusement parks. It's also for, people enjoying theater, people enjoying dance, people enjoying concerts, and also people just enjoying flowers. Like the flowering of Tivoli Garden is world class. So I think when you talk about customer experience, it's important to know that what that means depends on the organization you work in. So in terms of delivering customer experience in a place like Tivoli, where everybody knows that what we are selling is an experience, is actually slightly easier than delivering customer experience in a heavily regulated compliance environment like an airport, where even though the customer is important, obviously, there's also different types of customers in an airport. There's passengers, but then there's also airlines. And sometimes there are, in fact, conflicting needs between the different customer types. But so to deliver a great customer experience depends on the organization you're in, and depends on really understanding the purpose and the strategy of that organization. Because to me, customer experience is a tool to reach the strategic goals. Yes. And obviously, it's often, deliver an excellent experience and people become loyal and they come back, things like this. But it's also sometimes understanding there are other organizational goals. So in an airport, efficiency and compliance is extremely important. So working on the passenger experience is something that needs to not only make the passenger happy or make them want to come back to the airport, it has to, or make them want to spend more in the shopping center. It has to also support efficiency and compliance, because that is, core to the business, you could say.
Yeah, and let's open that up a little, particularly around airports. Many people that are watching or listening to this podcasts kind of didn't see any airports for 3 or 4 years while we had that friendly visitor, but now are starting to travel all over the world again. And while some airports seem to have taken the opportunity to reinvent themselves a little bit in COVID, a number still aren't. And I always find it interesting that the airline is almost their part of their customer experience or their customer's journey is out of their hands and belongs to that airport. So is this a good airport to transit through or not a good airport? So what are some of the things that you believe make a great experience in an airport? What could airports do to make that experience better?
Well, working on customer experience is also about prioritizing what to work on exactly. So if you look at the passenger experience, you could work on 150 different parameters, but what you need to do first and foremost is figure out where you should put your energy, your budget, and your time. So one of the things that we had done in Copenhagen Airport was we had a driver analysis done to figure out, of all the different parameters that affect the passenger journey and the passenger experience, what is the most influential? And so by far, the security experience was represented 6 places in the top 10. So if you are
Wow.
to prioritize your time and energy, forget about delivering a top-notch experience in the toilets. First and foremost, you need to make sure that you have a great security experience because it influences the way people perceive the entire airport. So, and with time, as technology develops and that experience becomes more seamless, that prioritization will shift. However, because for so many people, security feels unpredictable because depending on the airport you travel from, procedures can be different, even though the rules behind it might be the same. So you can travel within the EU, and what you need to do in security differs from airport to airport because there is different technical equipment. So,
Yeah.
To answer a question that you most likely have.
Yeah.
So one of the things that to me is very important is to look beyond what is obvious. So many people will say, oh, we need service training, or, we need to work on our front staff to make the experience better. But sometimes it's actually about working on the management and what they prioritize in the operation. So for instance, a thing that is prevalent across any airport that I've been talking to for the past, year, is that frontline staff experiences a lot of conflicts and a lot of difficult situation with passengers because we've spent some years away from flying and now we're coming back and some things have changed and some people feel more insecure than they did before. A lot of the staff is completely new, and so there's just a lot of tension. And instead of thinking, oh, we need to service train the staff, it might be as simple as saying, okay, in this touch point, what is the most difficult situation that our staff and our passengers experience, and what are the most frequent difficult situations? So that's one way that I've been working on when I was in Copenhagen Airport, together with the management team of security, was to look at what are the specific situations that are difficult for passengers and staff. So I would both look at complaints, and that is one thing that I sometimes get a little bit annoyed with when I hear people talk about CX, because it's all about measuring the experience. But there's a lot of stuff you can't measure.
Yep.
Because people aren't necessarily conscious of their needs or their behavior. So when I was looking at the customer experience, I wasn't just asking passengers. I was also asking employees. I was looking at complaints, and I was looking at, feedback on TripAdvisor, things like this, to sort of get the full picture. And I would laser focus on what we did bad, like what we didn't succeed with in the way that we hoped. So one of the things I did was I asked staff, what are a frequent occurring situation that you find difficult with passengers, something that happens 3 to 5 times per week.
Okay.
And so I would ask all our security staff this. And then I would look at our customer feedback, and we did something that was similar to Net Promoter Score, but of course you can't ask people in security checkpoint if you are
that's right.
recommending other people.
They're never going to recommend it, are they? Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have a choice, so you can't ask that question.
Right.
But so it was a lighter question. It was, what was your security experience like today on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is horrendous and 10 is fantastic. And so I would look at the comments between 0 and 6 and zoom in on what was the issues there. I would zoom in on what was the issues employees brought up. So that was typically when I get accused of harassment or discrimination, like, oh, I'm taken out for a random check. It must be because I am fat or black or Jewish or,
Interesting.
whatever a part of your identity that you have felt bumped other people. I don't know if bump is the right word, but forgive me, not my native language. But like whatever part of your identity that you have felt sort of hit in the head with previously is the go-to response. And so when that is not the case, of course, like any airport, we weren't completely perfect with everything, but most of the time we could see that it was a misunderstanding about the procedure where we could do something to explain better why that happened, or we could say something that would make it clear to the passenger that it was not because of anything else but this. So looking at that, the way I see it, when you work on CX, if you slice from the bottom, take what you're doing worst or what staff feels is difficult for them on an everyday basis, you raise the bar continuously, where a lot of people, they want to start with the icing on the cake instead of building it solidly from the ground up. And another big advantage to working that way by including the employees is that you avoid that they feel you didn't see their needs. And if you don't see their needs, customer experience will never become relevant for them. So let me give you an example. When I worked in Copenhagen Zoo, this was my first job as a manager. I was the sales manager, so I was responsible for the people in the entrance. So people selling tickets and the people making sure that people that entered had tickets. And they were also renting out little carts for families to use if, the kids didn't want to walk.
Of course.
And so they'd had, I don't know, lots of different managers over time that had not really been interested in the entrance, because there was other parts attached to the job. It was also, you were also responsible for the sponsors and other things. And so when I started, I was like, okay, we got to service train. So I made that, like I had them go through a service course, and it was one of those huge failures where, we had a great day and the croissants were good, but that's all that ever came of it, because I hadn't made that course relevant to their specific tasks and their specific challenges on the job. So they felt, it wasn't relevant in their everyday lives. Okay, she wants us to, smile and be great hosts. But what do we do when someone comes and yells at us for not having the cart that they wished? That was the challenge they had. So I wish that I had been wiser at the time, but that came with failures. But so instead of doing this overall service course, I should have looked at situational training or situational understanding of their job and giving specific tools to that, so that it was obvious that, working with the customer experience is something that also gives you an easier everyday life, because you have less conflicts and, you have more fun at work. But I wanted to sort of start from, you could say, the outside in, because I want to start with the customer instead of starting with the employee. So, So to me, if you want to do solid work on customer experience, you have got to look at the customer experience with a 360-degree view, looking at it from employees, reading complaints, looking at your feedback if you have any. But honestly, if you're just starting out working on customer experience, drop the feedback and just start with your biggest challenges, because that's where you're going to have the most effect. And it's also, exactly, and it's also where you're going to have the biggest cost. The customers that complain, they leave you, they don't buy anything. If they're forced to use you like they can in an airport, they don't support you, and they create more conflicts for the staff. They block a process, we become less efficient. There's just tons of effects that come from challenging situations that cost the company a lot of money.
I have to say, I've changed flight patterns before, travel patterns, to avoid a certain airport. And I'm not going to name and shame, but there's a couple of airports around the world that I'm just not a big fan of. That whole thing about security too was really interesting. I think it's an often misunderstood area. I see people that travel, once or twice. They've never really traveled a great deal, get totally flustered at security. Because when they go to the supermarket, there's no security. When they go to the bank, there's no security. Suddenly they're at the airport and everything is on show type of thing. And then I see those travelers like you and I that are in and out of an airport 3 times a week. And we just kind of we're just looking for what's the shortest queue. One of my favorite movies is Up in the Air, where he just talks about, no, don't go there. They've got kids. Go in this queue, that type of thing. What about that tension too between the retailers that are in an airport and the passengers that want the most direct line to the gate? But of course, the retailers would prefer that they took a line that came past their retail store. You're going to have that tension in there. Have you found that in your work? Does that come across as part of the customer experience? Is which way they have to walk?
Yeah. So the business passenger typically wants the direct route. The thing is, it's the retailers that finance the development of the airport. So just buy that Toblerone, support them.
Yeah. Just go and buy that new Toomey suitcase that you've been looking at.
Yeah. So there's no way around the retailers because it's what finances the development of most airports. So
yeah, wow.
Yeah. But you're right. Like you and I, when we travel alone, we're the efficient passenger. We just want the quickest route.
Yep.
So if the security person starts talking to us about, did you remember your sunscreen? We're going to blow a fuse. But the special needs passenger will feel calmer if you have that procedure in place for them. A little bit of a chit chat to get them to calm down will make it easier to get your message across about what needs to be taken out of the bag. They don't feel threatened. They don't freeze up, and they don't have their stress guard up, if you will.
So what was the big feedback about security? Was it that it took too long, the lines were too long, or the process itself, or what was the?
Yes. So Copenhagen Airport is in general an airport where there's not a big line in security. It happens obviously after COVID. It has happened. I wasn't part of the airport after COVID, just to say, but that has happened in any airport, because what people fail to understand is that it was an industry that died for 3 years.
Yes.
And it has and still has a big cost on, knowledge having left, the aviation industry and so forth. But so in general, there's not a big line. However, when there is a line, nothing else matters. So if you if you look for customer feedback at a time where there's a big line, you will never know what your staff, how your staff is perceived, and you won't know anything else, because that's the go-to comment. So that's what I can see across the different measurements that we did. However, when I looked at the 0 to 6 comments, in 0, 1, and 2, we would have answers like, I'm sure that you just asked me this to annoy me because in another airport, this was different.
Yes.
And so what that person says to someone, reading from an airport perspective is, I don't understand why your procedure is different. Yeah. And that makes me think that you're doing this to discriminate me or to annoy me, or just because you're having a bad day. So it was very obvious to us. And when I say us, I did a co-creation workshop with some of the security staff and some of the managers. It was obvious to us that if we could somehow easily explain why a procedure is different to those passengers, that the staff, when I asked them their most challenging situations, also said, it's when people roll their eyes when I ask them to take their iPad out of the bag, or it's when they roll their eyes because they had to do something different somewhere else. And so it was obvious to us that having a short, sharp, easy to implement phrase that would explain to people why it is different. And I said it to you just before, because there is technical equipment in different airports. Procedures are different, even though regulation is the same. So
Yeah, we have that definitively in Australia. The two biggest airports are Melbourne and Sydney. Melbourne, you've got to take everything out, but you can leave some stuff in your pockets, and you just walk through. There's that. And then you go to
yeah,
Sydney Airport, where you leave everything in your bag, but you can't have anything in your pockets. And so that route is, it's every half hour there's a flight. It's a shuttle. So the different experiences for people, and
yeah.
I've got to say personally, I don't mind if there's a line at the airport for security, so long as I can see that the security process is working efficiently. People are moving
Mhm.
through, and it makes sense. And it's why that when there's just security people walking around, kind of scratching their head, and nobody can quite understand what's going on, that's when it gets a little bit kind of confusing. For anyway, I want to pivot a little and ask you to look into your crystal ball, about the future, the future, either the future of just CX in general that you're seeing, whether that's in
Mhm.
Denmark or across Europe, and or the future of CX around airports. What do
Right.
you think's coming?
Well, again, it's important to stress that my talking point is companies that have flow of customers, that have a personal interaction with that customer in some shape or
Yep,
form across the journey, right? So obviously, if I didn't say AI and digital, people would think I was crazy.
of
So
course.
obviously, in customer service entities, there will be an element of AI aiding the agents in the front and such. And I think we're going to see much more of that in all kinds of shapes and forms that we can't even imagine. But if
Okay.
I should take my own experiences and think about what has had the hugest impact on my CX work, it's actually from when I introduced the hidden disability sunflower in Copenhagen Airport. So it's a symbol that you can wear to show staff that you have a hidden disability. And when you join the hidden disability sunflower as an airport or any other type of organization, you train your staff to understand what a hidden disability is, what the sunflower
Mm,
means, and how to best accommodate somebody that has chosen to make their disability visible. So the reason I bring this up is because when we implemented the training in Copenhagen Airport, I can honestly say, and it's not because I've done bad work, there's awards and stuff to prove that I know my stuff,
of
but
course.
I can honestly say that I have not implemented anything that had a greater effect on both passenger experience, employee experience, the company brand as this had. Like we got so much love from introducing this. And so the reason I'm talking about this is that I think that for companies to look at how to provide a more including and accessible experience for different types of minority groups, that is something that I think will grow, especially in the type of environment where you have customer flow and one-on-one interactions with people. Because once you start providing a great experience for the customers that have the hardest time having a good experience with you, you
Hmm.
actually raise the bar for everybody.
Of
So
course.
let me give you an example. If you, as an airport, can provide a stress free, um, accessible, and smooth experience for someone who is autistic and has a visual and hearing impairment, then you provide a much less stressful experience, even for you and I traveling as business
Yeah, for
passengers.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that you are done with your inclusion and diversity work, just doing little things like that. If you really want to accommodate people with different hidden disabilities, there can be other things that you need to implement. However, making our staff aware of how stressful it can be to go through an airport as an autistic person or as someone with PTSD or even someone with dyslexia can have a very stressful time because it can be difficult to follow signs. So making them aware of that made it easier to understand the type of stress that even the business passenger might have. So I had a
Mm.
a member of the security staff come up to me after we had implemented and said, you know, in the beginning, I was looking after the passengers that were wearing the sunflower because I wanted to do that little extra and be that give that extra
Mm.
understanding, but I've come to see that some of the stress that people that have chosen to wear the lanyard experience also comes through in people that maybe have a hidden disability but didn't want to disclose it, or who are just stressed out of their minds because maybe they're going to a funeral, maybe they are missing their flight, maybe that, there's all kinds of different reasons. So we sparked an understanding of the passenger stress by doing this training that affected much more broadly, right? So I think for me at least, my work has turned from looking at the biggest challenges in the customer experience to also being curious about who are the customers that we do not have because they choose not to fly. Who are the customers that never buys anything at the retailer because going through the airport is too stressful. So a lot of the feedback that I got right after we launched was people was writing, like someone was writing me, I'm so proud. I've never been able to buy a cup of coffee in the airport, and today was the first time I was able to do that. And her story is that she has a hearing impairment. So going through security is extremely stressful. She feels treated like a criminal because she can't necessarily always follow the verbal instructions. And so, people will look away. She can't read the lips, and people in the line gets frustrated with her. So she just feels annihilated by staff, by other passengers. And when she's done with it, she just flees to the gate to recover before her flight. And so she said, because I knew I could make my disability visible with you and you were trained, I even felt comfortable going to buy that cup of coffee, although I know that a lot of the times people will, because she has a deaf accent, so people will, look at me like, what? And this day I was able to handle it. But it didn't even happen because the person in the Starbucks was also trained. We trained all passenger-facing airport staff.
What a great story.
So,
what a great story.
So I think there is a lot, and 1 in 4 has a hidden disability. So it's a huge customer segment. And so if you can provide an experience who is less stressful for the people that have the hardest time going through, you can potentially increase sales for everybody. So
fantastic.
You might think, okay, a cup of coffee is not a big deal. But in an airport that at the time had 30 million passengers, if 1 in 4 has a hidden disability, if we just hit 10% with $2 extra, that is a huge business case, right?
Absolutely,
So I think my work at least is turning towards looking at what is our greatest challenge with the customer experience, but also looking at what are the customer segments that might choose not to shop with us or fly with us because that experience is just too stressful, and how can we alleviate that in a way where we open our business up to both passengers or customers and employees that might struggle with challenges that you can't see.
That's a fantastic thing to focus on and work on. I think that's wonderful. We're almost at time, and I have 3 questions that I love to ask everybody. But before I do, I have to ask a 30-second answer to, when you travel through airports that aren't Copenhagen, what is your one thing that annoys you more than anything else? Or is there not one?
You'll have to edit this pause out.
That's fine.
It is when signage is not logical for the passenger, signage and wayfinding. So you'll have airports, you are as a passenger looking for the exit, but on the signs it'll say, baggage, delivery, or if you arrive without baggage, you're not looking for baggage delivery, you're looking for the exit. So things like this,
awesome.
where you can just see your efficiency is going down because you don't have the view of the customer is the way you do signs and wayfinding. And then, of course, it annoys me when it's obvious that efficiency and compliance becomes compromised because staff isn't trained correctly to communicate with the passenger in a way
that would be your pet thing. I could just see smoke coming out of your ears. Okay, final 3 questions really quickly. Outside of airports, just when Stina's living her life doing whatever, what does a great experience entail for you? What's a great experience?
It's when my needs as a customer are anticipated,
Wow.
and
Okay.
you can tell that there's been work going into delivering on those needs and sometimes exceeding it. I'm very much against the whole talk in customer experience about delivering above expectations, because that
Mhm.
can be extremely expensive. But
Yes.
when a company has purposefully engineered the way they, for instance, handle difficult situations. So if I'm not happy as a customer with something and I complain, and that complaint
Yep.
is caught and treated in a way where I get the, I want to come back, and I feel
Yep.
that they sort of recovered well on that experience. So when that
Okay.
happens, I think it's absolutely better.
Okay.
So
Second
anticipation of
question.
needs and delivery on them. Yes.
Awesome. Second question. What do you wish companies did more of?
Listen to their employees instead of measuring customer experience all the time.
Oh, I love that answer. I
Yeah.
always love the mathematical equation CX equals EX, or the other way around, actually. EX equals CX. If your employees are happy, you've got, okay. The
Companies
third,
spend so much money measuring instead of using the free resources available inside the company.
yes. The third one that everyone wants to know, what book are you reading right now, or what podcast are you listening to? What's influencing you?
I'm going to deteriorate my personal brand here. I've
That's
started
okay.
like 3 companies in 2 years. So when I'm not working, I watch shit TV, like
Nice.
Selling Sunset on Netflix, that kind of stuff. I'm
Lovely.
I'm not reading books currently because my brain needs time off when I'm not
You
working.
know
So
what? You are the
TV.
first. You're the first person that I've interviewed to admit that. But I think everybody has that thing where you just need to sit down and let some, as you said, some shit TV, some trash just flow over you and get going.
Yeah.
Look, today has been a great interview. Thank you. I don't know quite who's got the better artwork behind them, but I love that it's so bright and colourful. Maybe someday
Well,
we'll
you know
swap.
what? I
We could
have a
swap art.
halo if I move over here. I think I
You
win because I have a
do.
halo. Yeah.
Yeah, I've just got colours behind me. Stine, thank you so much for being on CX Sessions, and I'd love to talk to you again sometime.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
That's it for this session. Let us know what you think or recommend someone for a future session at cxii.com.au. This podcast is brought to you by the Customer Experience Innovation Institute. Thanks for joining us, and tune in again soon to hear more CX sessions.